Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we explore convenient yet effective shortcuts that will help you get ahead and move forward faster by becoming a better leader. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert, and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbaugh.
Call Center Coach develops and unites the next generation of call center leaders. Through our e-learning and community, individuals gain knowledge and skills in the 6 core competencies that is the blueprint that develops high-performing call center leaders. Successful supervisors do not just happen. So go to callcentercoach.com to learn more about enrollment and download your copy of the Supervisor Success Path ebook now. Okay, Fast Leader Leads, and today I'm excited because I have somebody on the show today who's absolutely going to be able to help us all, as well as individually, move forward faster. Jessica Hartung was born and raised in Downers Grove, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. She had a very small immediate family, 1 older brother and no cousins. Her parents were both very active in the community. Jessica's mother was a teacher's aide in an elementary school and later worked at the Downers Grove Public Library and still visits every library in towns where she travels just for fun. Her father was a scientist at Argonne National Lab and became an activist for the environment and engaged in urban planning to preserve the Lyman Woods and other irreplaceable natural habitats. In order to protect the environment and enact energy-saving policies, he taught himself about the law, grassroots organizing, and public policy so he could testify before the necessary commissions to bring about water conservation and environmental protections. He was honored as Citizen of the Year by the Downers Grove Chamber of Commerce. As a clear example of a conscious professional who learned what he needed to create positive change, he's been an inspiration to Jessica on her path. As a child, Jessica raised money for the neighborhood park district as a way to show how important it was to protect the wild spaces. Jessica grew up spending time by herself in nature with a creek, trees, and critters as friends as well as humans. Intending to become a high school teacher, Jessica studied education at the University of Michigan, and after a conflict with her professor, she got a job working in a local startup technology business. Shortly thereafter, she began a small consulting business and began applying her desire to grow and develop the skills needed to create productive and enjoyable work environments. Her first business, Machine Teach, was a Macintosh training and computer consulting firm that worked with nonprofits and small businesses. It was through working with the local Girl Scout Council as a computer consultant that she began to study leadership and learn about Francis Hesselbein, Peter Drucker, and other leadership thinkers. Today, Jessica inspires people to see the purpose of work as learning and development, and for us all to discover better ways of working that enrich our lives as well as create a positive impact. She's the author of The Conscious Professional, Transform Your Life at Work, and founder of Integrated Work, a leadership development firm that works exclusively with mission-driven organizations and serves as a learning laboratory about progressive work practices. Jessica is on a mission to build more self-aware ethical leaders and is encouraged by increasingly widespread movement to use business as a force for good. Based in Boulder, Colorado for the last 24 years, she has raised 2 children, a 16-year-old son and 21-year-old daughter, and lives with her husband, astrophysicist Stephen Hartung. Most early mornings, she can be found walking around the Twin Lakes open space, taking in the scenery and watching for owls, kingfisher, osprey, and the great blue heron. Jessica Hartung, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
Absolutely. My pleasure.
I'm glad you're here. Now, I've given my legion a little bit about you, but can you share what your current passion is so that we can get to know you even better?
Absolutely. I really appreciate the introduction and the way that you chose to focus on the whole person. One of my passions right now is how do we bring who we really are to what we do? And the reason that I'm interested in that is because when we bring the things that we value, that which is important to us, into our workplace, we find that there's all kinds of opportunities we didn't realize, ways in which we can add our signature approach, we can use our values, we can follow our interests, we can follow the things that really matter to us. And you know what, the reverse is also true. I was working actually today on planning an event for the New Year's, and we're using the same project management technologies and ideas and concepts that we use in workplace in our home life. And so there is a mutual beneficial relationship between work and life when we bring who we are to what we do, and we actually sort of wake ourselves up a bit more so that we're paying attention and we're actually being deliberate in how we go about learning at work, learning from work, and bringing those back and forth between our personal and our professional lives.
You know, I mean, when you start talking about that, of course, I have to reflect upon my own experiences. And I'm like, well, gosh, for me, you know, it took age and a whole lot of, you know, knees and elbows skinned in order to kind of come to those conclusions. And I would say for me, a lot of that, as far as conclusion aspects of it and ahas, or whatever we want to call them, you know, really didn't start happening until within the last decade. And I just turned 50 this year. So it's like, you know, I think there's an opportunity for us to do a better job of mentoring others, teaching others. And I would also dare to say that there's a lot that go through their entire career and never figure it out. And one of the things that in your book that I really liked, which is very simple but yet pretty powerful, is the AWS cycle. Can you please share?
Yes, I would love to. Jim, I'm really glad you raised that, because as I was exploring how do people make deliberate change, so let's say there's an area that you want to improve, or maybe you just generally want to get better at, you know, whatever your craft of your work is, whether it's leadership or management, and you want to get better. You want to first figure out where or what is it that needs to improve. And what I find is that as a manager, sometimes my role is to help people illuminate that and see, oh, this was an area they weren't even aware could be improved, or they weren't aware of the impact they were having on others. So really all development that's conscious, deliberate, intentional development starts with an awareness. And sometimes that awareness comes from ourselves internally. Sometimes it comes from information that we receive, a 360-degree feedback, for instance, or a conversation with a colleague, or even reading an article and realizing, oh, there's something more possible, or listening to a podcast that opens our minds a little bit more. So we go from awareness into willingness. And not everything are we willing to do, which is actually a good idea, because we want to focus on, there's a phrase that says, if you can't say no, your yeses mean nothing. If you don't actually really have choice, then you're not wholly into it. You're not actually choosing this. So willingness is really important, because it's where we put our values into action. That's where we decide, are we going to take this on or not? And there are times when there's developmental opportunities that we need to say no to because we're focused elsewhere, or we're working on something that requires our full attention. But when we say yes and we are willing to grow in a specific area, then we start to actually practice. And that's where we get into the development of skills. And that's where, you know, maybe we're not very good at it at first, but that ability to get started and practice, that's what we do on a daily basis at work, where we're riding right on that developmental edge of our capability. We might not really know how to do it yet. And so that's where there's a lot of research now about deliberate practice and how people learn to be great athletes, how they learn to be great musicians. Well, how you learn to be a great leader or a great whatever it is that you would like to be and work on, that's how you do it, by practicing. And so what I find is that people are constantly going through this awareness, willingness, skill cycle in different areas of their work. And sometimes we're building our awareness based on having done the work. So, for instance, writing a book. I had not done that before. And I thought I knew a lot more about it than I actually did. Once I started getting into it and working with editors, oh my word, there's a whole world I just had no idea about. And so my awareness increased, and I really had a commitment that I feel the executive leadership development I've been doing with folks in, individual conversations or in group conversations where there is an organization that wants to hire a professional development expert. That's too small of a group. I think there's no reason why excellent quality professional development shouldn't be available for everybody who wants to engage in it. We have the technology, we can do this. So my willingness to put myself in an area where I don't yet know how to do a great job and amplify my commitment, that really spoke to my values of having an impact. I needed to write this book in order to improve the impact I have. And so then I build my skills. And as I did, now I'm thinking about how the next book is going to be different because I built more awareness. So we're constantly going through that cycle of awareness, willingness, and skill. And knowing that, it makes everything make a lot more sense. Because when people are not aware, of course they're not willing. When they're not aware, of course they're not working on it. They're not building their skills. And if you are a manager or leader and you realize that someone's aware, but they're not working on it, it's probably a willingness issue. So it gives you a chance to kind of diagnose where are we in the cycle, and that gives us a lot more control.
Gosh, as you were talking, there are so many things that I started thinking about. First of all, you actually have a diagram talking about the developmental edge, and I want to talk about that in a moment. But then you also said something to me that resonated so heavily, because it's really why I developed Call Center Coach, is that, we think that there's a trickle-down effect that happens with leadership skill development and competencies. Like, hey, if we give it, the investment and all the money to those folks at the senior level, it'll matriculate its way down to the front line. And that's not what happens.
And I don't think it's a good bet.
It's not. And I mean, so we have this massive gap, and we have this massive leadership crisis. And we have a lot of leaders who are significantly worried about the bench strength of the leadership of their organization.
Yes.
And so we got to be able to take it down to the front line. Otherwise, the crisis is just going to get worse.
And that is something I would like to comment on. It is my practice and belief that we have leaders at every level of the organization. And that, let's take in my organization, our administrative assistant, receptionist who is working, she has such power in the organization as a leader that she either takes on or she doesn't. And one of the great things about being in a small business is that I've been able to build the culture of my organization with that in mind, and really helping to encourage her leadership. She sets up people's calendars, and all in a billable environment, everything is orchestrated around that. There's tremendous leadership in how clients are received and how they're actually acknowledged, and her ability to influence our logistical side of our business is tremendous. Now, in many organizations, she would not be considered a leader because she doesn't have direct reports. I think about leadership in a different way. I think about it as how we create the future together. Because you really know a leader is working together with you when you are together thinking about what kind of future are we trying to create? Oh, a stress-free, productive, help, and we're both orienting towards that. That's leadership. So what kind of future you're trying to create and how you go about creating it, and is it a kind of future that includes other people and is of advantage to other people as well as the organization? Those kinds of leaders are people want to follow. They're excited to be a part of their team. They're inspirational because everybody wants to be working together to create that future that benefits them and those around them. That's really, the kind of leadership that I think all of us want to be a part of and want to exhibit when it's our turn to lead.
There's a really important point that you are talking about there that was, heavily written about within the book, and that is, being able to develop within the current, position that you are in. Because for the longest time, I have always fought against people thinking that, a position of greater responsibility, becoming, someone who is a leader authority means that I have to climb some rung in some ladder. And that's not the case. Sometimes it's being the expert right where you are and being able to find, gratification and appreciation within that. And you talk about that.
Yes, and the thing that I'm really passionate about that part is that why wait? If we were going to be, let's say, so I did telemarketing as my job when I was in college. And I took that job because that professor in my education class was so bad that I had to tell him so. And he asked me not to come back to class. And so I went and got a job in a business. And part of the thing that was so exciting for me was that if you apply the idea of experimenting and testing, and let's try this, and let's work together to figure this out right where we are, because no one else in the company knew how to do telemarketing. And I realized that, and I thought, oh, well, then I guess I need to learn. And that moment changed my life, because it made me realize that whatever job we have, whether our managers are looking out for our learning or not, we don't have to outsource that. It's actually something we can take on ourselves and own our own learning. And we can own our learning, not just related to our job, but related to what kind of future we want for ourselves. So I always, had an interest in making sure that my jobs served my strategic line of sight as well as the organization's. And that really promotes that kind of learning where you're saying, well, I know some point in the world, in my future, I'm probably going to need to influence people. So I took a job in sales. I thought, if I need to know how to influence people, I at least better have had some experience with this. And so while I was working in that job selling computers, that was actually how I started my first company. Was I was selling computers, and what I realized is people would buy the computers, but they still couldn't get done what they bought the computer for. They needed somebody to help them with that. And so I found a need and I filled it. And that idea of creating my own learning so that I could be in the position I wanted to be in, that was transformative. And it's been something that's made a huge difference for clients who've taken that on for themselves.
Gosh, you talked about the line of sight. That's something I wanted to talk about as well. But I also don't want to leave the fact that I had mentioned something about this developmental edge. And because for me, the illustration that you have in the book about it, really for me, kind of, allowed me to get an understanding of different levels of this that I really didn't, consciously think about, but, it really rang true. And so when you start talking about those different levels, first of all, in the center, you're talking about mastery, what I'm doing in my role, my responsibility. And then we have a comfort zone, and then we have a necessary stretch. And then you had mentioned the developmental edge. So if you tell us a little bit about how you came about this. In addition, this whole fear factor and willingness thing. When I start thinking about this developmental edge, it's like, I'm not going out there because I may fall off.
It's so true. I think fear and doubt and uncertainty kind of constrain our world if we allow them to. In a zone of mastery, you have some areas in your work and in your life where you feel really like you know what you know. You have expertise and you are good at it. And that's a zone of mastery. Now, sometimes the zone of mastery will last a lifetime. I used to be a masterful desktop publisher. Well, that does not last a lifetime, because unless you continue to renew those skills, the world moved beyond my mastery set. And so, but when you are in a zone of mastery, it's not just that you're good at it; it's that you feel a sense of flow and connection. It's the where you like to work. Now, in your job, you can also work in other areas that you're comfortable in. You would be in your comfort zone. It's not hard for you. You can do it, but it's not necessarily your smaller zone of mastery where you're really excellent. In the comfort zone, it's a wider sphere. Now, when we get into workplace challenges, we often have to stretch. We might have to do public speaking. We might have to, have a difficult conversation with someone, or in other ways, stretch ourselves to be a little bit more capable than we might otherwise feel we had the ability to do. And it's that necessary stretch that actually, as an entrepreneur, has been a huge part of my experience. Because no, I did not know how to do cash flow statements. I did not know how to be a government contractor. I had to learn those things. They were all necessary stretches. And then sometimes your necessary stretch takes you out on the very edge, the limits of your capability and your capacity and your competence, and you're hanging on to that edge saying, okay, there's got to be a way to learn my way forward. And you're absolutely right that a lot of reasons why people don't do that is because their fear of not being good enough. And yet, how do we learn how to be good? We practice. Yeah, we practice. And as we practice, especially in the areas where we can be paying attention and be aware of the fact that we don't yet know how to do this. And so an example might be when I had first started writing proposals for contracting work and consulting work. Well, I hadn't had a whole lot of consultant proposals that I'd seen, so I didn't have a whole lot of models. I had to figure something out and do something. And then I got feedback, and some clients hired me, some clients didn't. Some people said, oh, this was really helpful or that. And so I gradually learned. And of course, I wasn't great at all of them, and some of them failed, and that was part of that process. And then my playing field expanded. I actually now can write much more sophisticated, much more involved proposals. And in fact, at this point, I'm not actually writing those proposals. I am training people to write those proposals. So it transitions. Your developmental edge changes as you grow in your profession.
Well, I think and you said this many times within the book, that willingness piece is, to me, I think that's a critical tipping point.
Yeah.
And I even have this struggle with, especially my oldest son, on the difference between can't do and won't do. He'll turn a lot of his won't do's into can't do's. I can't do that. I'm like, you need to try again. It's meaning that you won't do that.
And the distinction that I'd like to make there that I think would be helpful is it may be a different framing or a different way. So, for instance, I'm talking about children. My daughter, who's in college, she's always been interested in animal genetics. Well, that's not a class that you can take in college. And so she wants to figure out where she's going to go to graduate school. And she started fostering kittens from the Humane Society as a way for herself to understand, do I really like working with animals? So, like she could say, oh, I can't go and have that interview, or I'm not willing to go have that interview with the professor at, such and such a university because I'm nervous and I'm scared and it's beyond my necessary stretch. I'm falling off the edge there. I'm not doing it. But instead, what she did is say, I'm actually not willing to do that. But what am I willing to do? And I think that's the nice jujitsu sort of move there, is that we can turn willingness into can't, but we can also turn can't into what are we willing to do, and to start to find creative solutions where we can take a step forward. Maybe it's just not the step that someone else had outlined for us.
That's a great point. So that's where some of that creative thinking has to kick in. Okay, so you talked a moment ago about the strategic line of sight. And for me, again, one of those seems pretty simplistic, but has a lot of significance and depth to it. So if you can kind of walk us through that, I think that would be very valuable.
I would love to. One of the things I've noticed, I work a lot with executives and people in a leadership team or who are working on a board, and getting strategic thinking rolling even at that level takes a little bit of work. Now, they might be actually formulating the strategy and looking at the priorities, and so it's part of their work to do that. And still, we have to translate, if our strategy is this, how does that relate over here, and how does that relate over here? Well, once again, why wait? Do not wait until you're on the board or at the C-level to have those kinds of strategic thinking happening in your work. When you look at an area of your work and you say, all right, am I responsible for, let's say, customer service numbers, or I'm responsible for a particular type of organizational fulfillment? How does that relate to our strategy? Where is the strategic line of sight between this piece of work that I'm doing and what's really important to the organization? And the reason why you want to know what that strategic line of sight is, because that development along that path, you will get support from your organization for. Because if you're developing the things that are already important to the organization and working on that and improving things in that way, you know that that's what people are looking for. I think it also works personally. When you say, well, what's the strategic line of sight with what I really care about? With, if I had a personal strategic plan, what would be my goals? What would be my priorities? And how can the work that I'm doing today relate to that? Like I was saying about having a sales job. That was really intimidating, very scary. I didn't know if I wanted to do it, but it was a great opportunity for me to say, I can see how this relates. I'm going to need to know how to influence people. I'm going to need to understand the finances behind things. I'm going to need to know this in my future. And so whether it's project management, budgeting, communications, these are skills that you can learn in many, many jobs. And you're looking for transferable skills that can be learned, honed, and grown right where you are so that it helps you in fulfilling your strategic objectives.
I think what you're talking about, I mean, for us is one of the competencies that we have in our model for those emerging leaders in customer care and contact centers and existing supervisors is that we've identified 6 competencies. And one of the things that I keep saying is that they will help you grow beyond this role, because
Yes.
business acumen is what you were talking about, is having
Absolutely.
that competency, knowing and understanding that whole strategic line, that strategic side, how things connect, how what you do every single day impacts that, and being able to convey that with those that are on your team.
Yes.
Why and how you're important and how it connects.
Yeah, and Jim, one of the things that's been happening for me lately as I've been talking to folks is seeing the bridge in between the personal and the professional. Someone I was speaking with recently has raised 6 children. Okay, you learn a few things about project management. You learn a few things about managing resources. And so I think that there are transferable skills between our personal and professional lives, as well as transferable skills between multiple professional roles. And when we're investing in ourselves and choosing to own our learning and do it deliberately, what happens is we have a lot more control over where our careers head and what opportunities come to us next, because we're actually creating those opportunities. We're making those opportunities by preparing ourselves, because we can see that strategic line of sight. What would someone in the job you most want, what would they need to know? What would they need to be able to do? Let's get started on learning it right now, because there's nothing stopping you.
That's a great point. Okay, so now you said, you have the consultancy, you just wrote your first book, and you even mentioned something about the next one. You have the kids, or, I think you're getting close to being that empty nester, but you got a lot of things going on. So if you talk about all of that, and you had one goal, what is that one goal?
I think my work in life has been oriented towards the idea of building more mission-driven, deliberate leaders. And the reason I think that's so important is when you look in our communities, and I see the school board, I see the county commission for this, I see the neighborhood association, I see the things that are happening in our communities that are the fabric of our lives. They are sometimes being led by amazing leaders, but more often they are led by people who are self-interested and don't have a very healthy relationship with power and have not built these skills. And our institutions and our communities are suffering as a result. And so what's really been important to me is that we change the way we think about work. Work is the place where we grow leaders at every level. And this is where we practice our capabilities so that we can lead in our lives, so that we can lead our families forward, so that we can lead our communities forward, our communities of faith, our government institutions that require citizens' participation. We are the folks who are, it's our turn to lead. And it's our turn to lead regardless of what our job title is. But when we start to see work as that developmental opportunity for building transferable skills, as an actual, like a second job that we have where we learn, I find that enriches our job. We actually are more engaged. All the things that employers want, employee engagement, employee satisfaction, retention, those things all increase when folks are actually using work as a learning experience to benefit themselves. So everybody wins, and that's what I've really been, like working so hard to create a book and a business and a team and, getting out there, because I believe that this is transformative for us as a society.
And the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best. Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. An Even Better Place to Work is an easy-to-use solution that gives you a continuous diagnostic on employee engagement along with integrated activities that will improve employee engagement and leadership skills in everyone. Using this award-winning solution is guaranteed to create motivated, productive, and loyal employees who have great work relationships with their colleagues and your customers. To learn more about An Even Better Place to Work, visit beyondmorale.com/better. Here we go, Fast Leader Legion. It's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Jessica, the Hump Day Hoedown is the part of our show where you give us good insights fast. And I'm going to ask you several questions. And your job is to give us robust yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Jessica Hartung, are you ready to hoe down?
Yes.
All right. So what is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
I think the thing that's holding me back is making sure that I make time in the mornings to really connect to myself and have that meditative, contemplative time. When I do that, my leadership is so much better. So changing my schedule so that is something that is a non-negotiable every day, that's going to move my leadership forward, and the lack of it holds me back.
What is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
If you're going to go into business with people, go into business with people with integrity. If they don't have integrity, nothing else matters.
What is one of your secrets that you believe contributes to your success?
Bringing what really matters to you to each interaction makes you feel like you actually are a whole person. Like who you are is who you are wherever you are, and that sense of integration is very fulfilling.
And what do you feel is one of your best tools that helps you lead in business or life?
Oh, and now I have to pick a different one besides awareness, willingness, skill, because that's a pretty good one. But I think the other tool that is very helpful to me is the ability to focus on what's happening with the other person. I think, through contemplation and meditation, you focus on what's going on with you. But what that does is allows you to have greater capacity to identify at an outward mindset what's happening around you, what's happening with others. And when you can do that, you can develop solutions that are transformative.
And what would be one book that you'd recommend to our Legion? And it could be from any genre. And of course, we're going to put a link to The Conscious Professional on your show notes page as well.
Thank you. There are so many wonderful, excellent books. Right now I'm reading Tara Moore's Playing Big, which is about that area of self-criticism and concerns that people have about how do we deal with our fears. So I'd recommend Playing Big by Tara Moore as a great way to address that practically epidemic fear that people are having around, I'm not perfect, therefore I can't do it, which then really limits the ability for you to play big.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net/Jessica Hartung. Okay, Jessica, this is my last Hump Day Hoedown question. Imagine you were given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25, and you can take the knowledge and skills that you have now back with you. But you can't take everything back. You can only choose one. So what skill or piece of knowledge would you take back with you, and why?
I have been facilitating professionally for the last 20 years. And during that time, I've learned how to have conversations that people are excited to participate in and that create great results. If I could bring one skill back in time, it would be facilitation skills, group facilitation to create an alignment and to create an understanding of what really matters and how do we move it forward. That's something I've developed over time. And boy, bringing that back with me at 25, it would have changed a lot of things.
Jessica, it was an honor to spend time with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
Absolutely. If you were to go to consciousprofessional.com, you'd find out more about the book and the current work that we're doing there. JessicaHartung.com also has some additional resources, including some free downloads for strategies to help move your career forward. I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn, as well as a Jessica Hartung author Facebook page.
Jessica Hartung, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. The Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump. Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.